Part 2. Did the $600 budget buy make it 1,000 kilometers home over the mountains on a ferry? Please, if you find any of this content interesting, please consider like, subscribe. I appreciate it. This thing was great. It's funny. I didn't think you could actually buy a car that will work and not break down. The BMW, we drove this thing back from Ontario and it had lots of problems, but it was a BMW. Surely this thing was going to break down. Something was going to snap off. Somebody had left this car with a critical problem. That's why they sold it. That's what everything's like here in the city. Everyone has a piece of crap and they sell it when the transmission's going or the engine's got a knock. But in smaller towns, I guess you can find stuff that's sold honestly. I can't believe it. It was great. It didn't skip a beat. It even has air conditioning. It doesn't have cruise control. Now, cruise control, you don't need it, but it's pretty nice to have. Your leg gets kind of tired. The Tucson is an interesting vehicle because you sit so high, your leg kind of pushes down more than out on the throttle, and you use a lot of throttle. Well, you do and you don't. It's an interesting engine. So we have this thing, 3 people, set of snow tires, full luggage. We're going up the Coca Hollow, which is a pretty steep grade, with 140 horsepower. The engine makes all of its maximum horsepower at 6,000. It makes its maximum torque at like 3,600. This thing's geared really short. It's great. It's actually made perfectly for the power. So 5th gear at like 120 is like 3,700 RPM. That's where you want to be. So going up steep grades, whether I was in 5th gear or 4th gear, was actually pretty similar in power. 3rd gear would give you a little bit more, but it almost didn't make a difference because it was right in the meat of the power band. You go up, you can lose a little bit of torque. You go down, you get a little bit of horsepower. But it was good. I mean, it doesn't have the most steering feel. It doesn't have the most brake feel. It's probably worn out. There's some clunks from the front's worn out. But, like, you don't need a fancy BMW or a sport package Focus or whatever to go over the mountain pass fast. You need a decent set of tires. The tires make a big difference. This thing has a good stereo. The air conditioning makes it an interesting rattle, but it worked really well. This thing has enough power totally. I drove 135 kilometers an hour for a long time through the mountains there, up hills, and it barely lost speed on the grades. You know, a comfortable interior. The seats are fine. The gear shift is fine. It's like when you rev it up past 4,000, it makes a racket in first and second. It's pretty loud. It makes power though. 3rd gear punch from 4 to 6. It's pretty decent actually, considering the humble roots of this vehicle. It was great. I was sort of sad for the trip to end, even though I got my other cars and you're like, wow, it's amazing when you drive a kind of normal car for a couple days, you get inside like the BMW and like that thing's like the least sporty suspension of the BMWs of this thing. The thing feels like a Lambo after driving the Tucson. But the Tucson was great. I like everything about this. Also, I find this very interesting. The cargo hatch in this, although it looks really short, like this thing doesn't look big. It perfectly fits 4 snow tires in the back. I mean perfect in the way that they don't roll backwards and forwards when you get on the massive power this thing has. It actually has plenty of power. There's a lot slower cars than this thing. I was passing all sorts of people. Look at that, perfect fit. Who designed that? So, you know that CRVs and RAV4s are really popular. Well, I never really understood it till now. This is not a big SUV, but it fit everything. It has a ton of room inside. It's quite useful. It had a bit of lift at higher speed. It was more happy going 110 than like 130. It started to get a little bit vague in the front end. But these tires, they held. They're only 215s, but they had really good grip. I did some pretty significant twisty roads at speed coming out of Radium, and man, it did great. So we made it. This thing had no problems. I was so happy because I didn't want to break down, have an overheat or a power steering explosion or a brake failure or a tie rod break off. Man, I've had all those things with crappy cheap cars I bought. This is the best low dollar car I've ever bought by a huge margin. So maybe I just got lucky. Maybe the people were really nice. Maybe it was the place I bought it. I don't know, but I really needed a good car at that time. So she did it. I never even looked at these cars on the highway before, but now I see them everywhere. And it's pretty good value for money. It's not like an amazing car, but it's a pretty good car. When you consider the value, it's amazing. Anyways, hope you found this content useful. I'll do a full review once I get this thing refitted. I got to do everything to get it safetied for its inspection, and we'll put a cool stereo in it and stuff because it deserves it. It's got 300,000 K, but this thing's got a lot of life left in it. Anyways, see you in the next one.